Hey, this is Tom Glavine, and you're listening to Out of Left Field on The Grueling Truth.
Hey guys, Graham and Chris back here with you again. We took a little bit more time getting the show out to you this week with the expectation that there might be some big news coming down through the pipes of Major League Baseball, and it was definitely a good choice that we made to sit back just a few more days and get everything out to you. So instead of our normal intro and banter, we're going to go ahead and put the ball in play and get right to it. And the New York Yankees, I think, is pretty safe to say, top the news of Major League Baseball this week. Obviously, first things first, they hire their new manager. We talked about this with the last couple of weeks. Once Joe Girardi left, they were going through looking for some different candidates. Carlos Beltran was one, which is a real head-scratcher for me. They also talked to Eric Wedge, former MLB manager, and then ended up deciding on ESPN analyst and former player Aaron Boone. Aaron Boone, obviously, his most famous, I guess, baseball moment would have been for the Yankees in 2003 when he hit that big home run off Tim Wakefield in extra innings to catapult the Yankees into the World Series, where they promptly lost to the now Miami Marlins, the Florida Marlins at the time, where Josh Beckett kind of made his coming out party of who he was in Major League Baseball. So, man, you know, it's interesting. You know, he gets I think it's $4 million a year is what I'm seeing. I think it's a 3-year deal for him, right about there. What are your thoughts? I mean, I know I put the article up on the Grueling Truth website and also through our social media stuff at Out of Left Field on Facebook, as well as at OO Left Field on Twitter. But, man, what are your thoughts on this?
Well, to be honest, I think this is sort of a mixed bag for New York. Is he a hometown guy, sort of, and probably a good leader in the clubhouse? Yes. Is he going to do a good job? Probably. Is he young? Absolutely. And the problem that I see with that is that the team is also very young. And I think that your assessment, the assessment that you made in the article, is spot on, that the Yankees wanted to go ahead and put a guy in place who didn't have enough managerial experience to make a gut decision that might hurt the club in a major game. They wanted a guy who was going to make the by-the-book sort of decision that a first-year manager is going to make, especially in a clubhouse full of young guys. And I think that Boone, one thing that he has going for him coming into this job as the manager of the Yankees is that he is really excited to be back in New York. The level of excitement and the level of sort of, I don't want to use excitement again, but you know what I'm trying to say. The sort of what he's bringing to the table at this point is
I mean, he kind of has that boyish excitement. And to your point on analytics, he said in his introductory press conference, quote, "I don't think I know everything. As I've done the job that I've had for the last 8 years, as I've dove into these numbers and dove into the information that's been new to us, when I flush things out, I find that there's pretty tremendous value in these things," end quote. So, yeah, analytics are going to be something that he is going to, you know, take part in. And he's not wrong. There is tremendous value in analytics, but when we saw what happened this postseason, this World Series, where analytics played, I think, for the most part, to a detriment to both managers in this series, you know, there comes a point where, you know, they rely so much on these numbers, guys, and we haven't seen it work in a tremendous fashion anywhere. The Cleveland Browns, who have been, I mean, they're an insult to call them a dumpster fire to all dumpster fires, but they just fired, you know, their analytics guy, which was going to kind of be what reshaped that football team because it's not working. So yes, it has a place, but I think that a lot of GMs now want to make that a focal point. And if that's what Brian Cashman wants, he has a guy in there that you can kind of impress that upon.
Well, and let's not forget that the one time that analytics made a really big splash in Major League Baseball was really that Moneyball team that Billy Beane put together in Oakland. Once that team made a big splash, Boston went ahead and decided to go analytics heavy. Other teams decided to go a little analytics heavy. But since that early 2000s success for things like sabermetrics and whatnot, we haven't seen a lot of direct success related to analytics. A lot of the old school scouting things have come back into play, and they've been just as successful as they have been for the last 150 years. And I think that's what we're going to see going forward. Now, when you say that analytics played to a detriment in the last playoff series, I agree, because both of those teams did exactly what any analysis tells them that they should do, and they put the guys in who statistically get hits in big places. But like you and I have discussed ad nauseum on this show, past prediction is not a perfect past performance is not a perfect predictor for future performance, and that is what turned out to happen. So while analytics is a big deal, and while analytics is great in the long-term success of a team, bringing on a guy who's going to rely solely on analytics and not on, his depth of experience in this position is going to be a little bit dangerous for such a young club, because you still have guys like Aaron Judge who are going to go up to the plate and they're going to swing at everything, and sometimes they're going to get a home run and sometimes they're going to strike out, and it's a coin toss as to what they do more often.
Right, and I think, at least to me at this point, the only spot where analytics, if you will, come into play was really what was done by Joe Madden with the Rays when he looked at analytics to develop the shift, which we now hate because guys don't adjust to the shift and they just play into it, and there you go. Unless you're Joey Votto and you just hit over the shift with 4 guys in the outfield, whatever it was. So yeah, it's going to be interesting. The one thing that really was big to me in this was the fact that Hal Steinbrenner, Yankees owner, obviously taking over after his dad George passed away 7-8 years ago. It's been quite a while. Is that both he and GM Brian Cashman, who we'll talk about here in just a second, and Cashman made really direct references to Boone's ability to interact, have that that ability to interact with players. Talking about basically that he's going to have the ability to he's a polished communicator. He has, as I'm going through Brian, I lost my notes here. I'm going through Brian Cashman's stuff, but he has very interpersonal skills. That's what I was looking for, and a good baseball pedigree. That that was the big knock against Joe Girardi. When we heard him talk, he seemed very calm, very collected. He could really explain the depth of his knowledge of baseball in an Ed Hockley-ian way, if you'll pardon the NFL referee reference. But Hockley is known for his kind of long diatribe, but he also can break down what's going on for the casual viewer, even if it takes him a few minutes. And that's what I kind of saw from Girardi. That apparently didn't translate into the clubhouse. He wasn't that well liked. He didn't have that kind of that interpersonal relationship with his players for the most part, and it seemed like that was grating on the players for the most part. So I guess the scary thing then is if they were playing that well for a guy, and granted, I know you don't play for your manager, but when you go to work every day and you're kind of, all right, we got to deal with Skip. This is okay, whatever. We got to do what we got to do. Now you've got a chance to play for a guy he's new, but he's not. He's less than a decade removed from wearing the same uniform or wearing a Major League Baseball uniform. He's a little over a decade removed from his time in the Bronx. But man, Aaron Boone here is changing the face of the Yankees really 2 times in 15 years. He played pickup basketball between the 2013-2014 season, blew his knee out. The Yankees traded to get Alex Rodriguez, changed the face of the organization. He comes in now. He's got a young lineup with Aaron Judge and Gary Sanchez, Didi Gregorius to work with. And then apparently Christmas came early. As it came out yesterday.
That is the understatement of the year.
Yeah. So it came out that right about 9:15 Eastern time yesterday that, now former Marlins slugger Giancarlo Stanton was flying north the way a lot of his home run balls do, and had been acquired by the Yankees. This is back to a lot of what we have seen from the Yankees back in the 90s. They were buying teams or whatever it was, but this isn't a horrible deal for the Yankees. It's not a great deal, but it doesn't also make them the outright contender for the World Series, in my opinion. And there are multiple reasons for that. And I'll get to that in the article that I'm also doing on this now, but it's a big move. There's going to be that question in Miami that, your new owner, Derek Jeter, is doing the same thing that Jeffrey Loria did, who you prayed to get ousted out of Miami and sell the team, and then he turns around and sells your best player to his former team, where he is, he would go on probably their, one of their Mount Rushmores. He's already been retired in their Hall of Fame and will be a Major League Hall of Famer in the next 4 years. So I'm kind of speechless at this point. I mean, what do you say to a move like this? I mean, this is kind of unprecedented. I mean, the National League MVP just got traded.
Well, everybody from all different sides of baseball have said different things, and it's been sort of interesting to hear some of the things that people have said, from the idea that the Yankees were just not going to rest on their laurels. They were going to do whatever it took to get back into the playoffs and put themselves in a position to win, which is what I think they've done exactly by hiring Stanton, although it doesn't fix a huge hole in their pitching rotation that needs to be addressed before the end of this offseason if they're going to have any hope of making another run. Like you said, I don't think CC Sabathia can carry this team. I don't think Masahiro Tanaka can carry this team. So they're going to need to do something in order to make sure that rotation is shored up by the time we get to April baseball. But having Giancarlo Stanton, his bat, be added into a lineup that includes, Aaron Judge,
Gary Sanchez, Brett Gardner. Gardner's an underrated hitter. Didi Gregorius, who we saw, had some really big hits last year.
Who had a huge postseason as well.
Yep.
Adding that bat into that lineup makes that lineup power heavy. And I think that's a big deal for them, because if they're not going to be able to stop people from scoring because their rotation's not the best, then what they're going to have to do is they're going to have to be able to outscore other teams. And the best way to do that is with heavy bats. Now, one thing that I think that this causes a problem for is you're talking about a Yankees team that has paid luxury tax every single year since luxury tax was introduced to Major League Baseball. And at the current time, they're being taxed at the maximum 50% tax rate, and taking on the biggest contract in Major League Baseball is not going to help. This is a 13-year...
It doesn't hurt. And the scary thing here is that the way Cashman worked this deal is that with the $30 to $35 million that they get from the Marlins in this deal, basically the Marlins are paying them, a mix of probably $10 million over the course of a couple of years. There's a good possibility here that the Yankees won't be in the luxury this year, which leaves them wide open, eerily, for a Bryce Harper or a Machado free agency coming in 2018.
It actually is going to put them several million under, which not only puts them in the running for a Harper or Machado in next year, which I think Harper would be, with the hiring of Giancarlo Stanton, I think Harper would be a bad move. You don't need another big batted outfielder, not with Judge and Stanton out there. But
agreed.
But a Manny Machado at third base, right? Plus the attitude. But a Manny Machado at third base, attitude or not, I don't know. I mean,
that all depends on Gleyber Torres, because with this move, Starlin Castro is the one piece that's getting moved to that is being moved in this deal, and it looks like that they expect Gleyber Torres to be starting this year either at shortstop or at third base for them.
That's great.
So,
if Gleyber Torres turns out to be the defensive phenomenon that Manny Machado is, good for them. But I seriously doubt that a Gleyber Torres is the sort of defensive phenom that Manny Machado is, and the sort of bat that Manny Machado can wield. Manny Machado adds not only a bat into this lineup, but Gold Glove style defense at third base annually.
So then I'll ask you this, just because I don't know why we're firing up a trade machine in the offseason. But
that's neither here nor there. I'm talking about the ability that being under the luxury tax gives them the ability to make another big move this year,
right,
for an arm.
Yes, the question is really what pieces are out there. You know, I mean, the one piece I could see them maybe interested in would be a guy like maybe a Jake Arrieta, a Yu Darvish, although here's why I think Yu Darvish is a good and a bad, because I see both here. One, Yu Darvish is notoriously hard on himself to a point where it's probably unhealthy. We saw that happen in L.A. We saw him, let's be honest, he crumbled under the pressure in the World Series. It just, he didn't look like him. He didn't play well. It was all just bad. The positive, though, is if you sign him, you pair him with a Masahiro Tanaka, which if they have had a relationship in the past and they are on a good term, you're able to pair a guy up with, someone of his own culture, someone of, kind of where he's from, and have that bond, which I think would be really, really good for him. But to me, if they're looking for a big arm, I mean, at the end of the day, it's either Lance Lynn out of the Cardinals organization or Jake Arrieta are probably two of the ones that they go look at. I just, like you said, man, I think the hard thing here is how many good arms are really out there.
Exactly. There's not a whole lot. In fact, the free agent list of arms is pretty short. Yu Darvish, Jake Arrieta, Brandon Morrow, who we'll talk more about later, the Yankees' own CC Sabathia, Andrew Cashner, Bartolo Colon, which retire already, man. I get it. You want to be the longest running starting pitcher in the history of Major League Baseball, but right, you just don't have it anymore. Matt Garza, who's only a free agent based on a team option, Greg Holland, who's a free agent based on his own option, Brandon Kinsler, Lance Lynn, and Alex Cobb.
I'll tell you, and that was the name I was going to say was Alex Cobb. Now, it's rumored that the Cubbies are targeting him heavily, and we'll talk about that here as the weeks go by. And that was really the reason why we waited so long on getting the show out, is that Stanton this year was the Edwin Encarnacion of last year. Once that domino fell, it's going to be busy. And with the winter meetings happening and all the GMs, all the King's horses and all the King's men have swooped down upon Orlando, the wheeling and dealing is going to be in full effect this week, and I think we're going to see a bunch of moves get made with agents and GMs and guys talking. So, yes, you're right. I love, I think it's great that the Yankees get Stanton. It makes for an exciting brand of baseball. It's great that it's on the East Coast with him and Judge, because you'll get to see more of it. We've seen really what happens when it's West Coast baseball, when it's West Coast anything, college football, anything. It's just not followed or appreciated as much. The one caveat I will give you here, and this is the big thing I mentioned in the article, you said if you don't have pitching that can keep the crooked numbers or the runners off base, then you got to outscore them. It's a lot easier said than done, and I know you know that. I'm not making light of what you said, but it's great that you have a guy that can hit 60 home runs, but unless his on base is hitting upwards of the high threes into the mid fours, that doesn't do a whole lot for you. So we saw with Aaron Judge. So yes, it's great, but and this is the line that I use in the article here. I'll go ahead and kind of give you the sneak peek into it as we're getting ready to put it up here on the gruelingtruth.net in probably a day or two. The old adage that defense wins championships has been proven time and time again. Well, pitching is the number one defensive position in all of baseball because it's mano-a-mano until that ball gets put in play. And as long as that pitcher can make that guy swing and miss or put a ball in play that's easily to go ahead and and retire him, then that's great. But if you don't have guys that can do that consistently, you're not going to be able to sustain that for 162 games. Yes, you're going to outscore a lot of guys, and that's great when your run differential is plus 100. But when you're outscoring a team 20-1, that's the same result as winning 2-1 or 1-0. The runs are great, but if you get all of them in one game, who cares?
And one of the things that this deal has going for it for the Yankees is that unlike other outfielders who have big bats or unlike other effective outfielders, Stanton is both. Stanton is both an effective defensive player and a big bat. When the Giants were looking at Giancarlo Stanton, they were looking at him as both of those things. When you go back and look at the people who are still on the board, the Lorenzo Cains of the world, who are great defensive outfielders but not big bats, or the J.D. Martinez's, who are big bats, but at 30 years old, his defense is starting to go downhill. When you look at Giancarlo Stanton, despite the fact that he's got 10 years left on this ridiculous contract that he signed, he is a very effective defensive player. So that helps this signing make sense. Now, if they can get under the luxury tax, if they can get down into a situation where they can sign one of these arms that's out there, even if it's not a big name arm, just somebody as a stopgap between Sabathia and Tanaka, even an Andrew Cashner, somebody like that. I mean, I saw you cringe when I said that. Maybe a Lance Lynn, maybe a Jake Arrieta. I don't know if you want a Jake Arrieta at this time in his career, given what he did last year.
I'll put it this way. If the Yankees sign Andrew Cashner in those hopes, what you better be hoping is that Andrew Cashner becomes the Jake Arrieta of the Baltimore Orioles, who all of a sudden, out of nowhere, goes from being this, look, man, you're never going to amount to anything, just be quiet. And Arrieta responds on Twitter, I'll be a Cy Young winner, you just watch. And then we saw what he did, and he was one of the best pitchers in baseball for a year or two. At the end of the day, this is all a moot point because, yeah, it's great when these guys can go ahead and get 90, 100 wins, and maybe right. I'm being generous there, but once we get into postseason baseball, it don't mean anything.
It doesn't mean anything.
It's all back up for grabs. We start back at 0, and we just kind of see where it goes from there. So, it's a huge move.
And we saw that play out. We saw that play out to perfection this year in the postseason because the Indians,
right,
and
the
100-win teams.
The part we're not talking about is the fact that the Marlins have traded D. Gordon, which we'll talk about here in a minute. They've traded Giancarlo Stanton, but all they got back for Stanton is Starlin Castro, which that's not your future, and a couple of prospects who aren't even top-tier prospects in the Yankees organization. So if you're doing this as a attempt to cut payroll and get yourself set for the future, how in the hell are you getting yourself set for the future with two guys who the Yankees didn't even think of as being really, a top-tier piece of our farm organization in the future? It just, I'm not a fan of the way the Marlins made out in this, and I think it looks bad on Derek Jeter because it's, hey, is he throwing a bone to his old team to where, let's be honest, at the end of the day, when he gets tired of doing this and he sells the team, his loyalty is going to lie in New York, not Miami.
I agree. And that's one of the things that people have been saying that I said that, things have been coming from all over the place. And one of the things is that this trade was made the way it was because Derek Jeter had a hand in it, and he is a Yankee. Once a Yankee, always a Yankee. I don't know if that's the case because, to be honest, another team made a hell of a deal for a big-name Marlin, and I don't think that Derek Jeter has any loyalty to the Seattle Mariners, who picked up D. Gordon and $1 million in international pool money for really nothing.
Yeah, the pool money was great until about Thursday or Friday. And then it was, okay, well, that pool money now no longer is really necessary because, well, the one piece they were trying to get now is going elsewhere. Real quick before we get on to this, one thing I wanted to mention to you, I saw in passing, the Yankees are reportedly finalizing a 5-year extension with Brian Cashman that will get him a total of $25 million. So, a couple of things that he has done
here.
This is a family show, so I won't.
This is a family show, so I won't give you my initial reaction to that story. But Sherlock Holmes is involved in that sentence. Brian Cashman just signed one of the biggest players in Major League Baseball in the National League MVP for peanuts. Yeah, he's going to get extended.
Yeah. But no, as you mentioned, D. Gordon gets moved. A guy who some are going to, I think fortunately, and it shows really the way that PEDs are looked at. At the end, when D. Gordon comes back to Miami, if he ever does, either with Seattle or their team, the one thing that will be seared into Marlins fans' memories, and even those that were watching, are going to be the home run that he hit the first game after the passing of Jose Fernandez. When he takes the first at bat from the right, or the first pitch from the right side, flips around, takes another, mashes it into right field, is just weeping, coming around the bases. And I've said many times, I'm not ashamed to say I was openly weeping when that happened. It was just that emotional. But let's not forget, this is a guy who led the NL in hitting with the Dodgers, went to Miami, and then sat for half a season because he got popped for PEDs.
Right. And to be fair to him, and to be fair to my stance on PEDs, yes, he got popped for PEDs. Yes, he sat. In my opinion, that negates any opportunity for him to do anything after his career as far as greatness is concerned, or to be enshrined in any way. You know that. I've made that statement several times. I'm not going to change it because I like D. Gordon. And I do like D. Gordon. But to be fair to D. Gordon, look at what he's done since. Look at what he did last year. He hit 308. He stole 60 bags. He scored 114 times and hit 201 hits, which is good enough for third best in the major leagues. And we can only assume that that's without performance-enhancing drugs. So in any category, this is a good deal for the Mariners, a team who have names like Gene Segura, who led the National League in hits 2 years ago, who have names like Robinson Cano, who should be a power hitter and a leader on that team. And I feel like this might be an opportunity. I think
Nelson Cruz is still there, isn't he?
Yes, and I feel like this should be an opportunity for that team to make a turnaround from the team where good big-name players go to die, because the number of big names that you see on that roster has translated into exactly nothing for the last 2 years, a steady 500 average, win average.
Right.
And I want to see them do something with it. I want to see them take that $1 million in pool money and sign 2 or 3 of these smaller name international stars, maybe some of these guys that the Braves have to give up. Obviously, not one of the big names that the Braves have to give up, which we'll get to later. But, a couple of these guys that have been released that they can make now $300,000 and $400,000 bonus offers to, and possibly pull these guys in and build a future for their club that they haven't been doing in the last 10 years. And I'm sorry to ramble on about this, but in my opinion, the Mariners have made a mistake in not dumping off and doing a full-scale rebuild and just being happy with the 500 average that they've had over the last 10 years, good enough to put butts in the seat, but not good enough to do anything with. Right. And eventually that wears on fans. And I know that because one of my good friends is a diehard Mariners fan, and he says it to me every single year.
Yeah, and I think we're both kind of the same boat on that. Just make sure with that $1 million that you don't try and funnel extra money through, other prospects to promise guys big bonuses. That'll get you banned for life. Just throwing it out there. It'll get you banned for life.
You don't want to end up in the little black book.
But no, I agree. I mean, we mentioned, Robinson Cano, Nelson Cruz, guys that, I couldn't believe that, that Cano left New York where he had been, done very well. He was comfortable there. That he got Nelson Cruz away from the Orioles that year. And we're thinking, man, them and, Felix Hernandez, everything looks great. And then you realize that, okay, King Felix is the only piece they had. And he's getting older. And he is, he found kind of the edge of the cliff, and he just stepped off. There was no gradual decline. He just stepped off. He doesn't have the power he used to have. The command is not there. It is concerning, I think, that, it's great that you're making these moves to get these big names, but, it's the idea that, and I'll put it in a way, I guess, in the military way. It's the idea that, that a grenade went off next to the tank and a ton of shrapnel holes, and we've taken 3 pieces of bubble gum and patched 3 holes, and we're going through the water. Okay, those 3 holes aren't going to leak, but the rest of them are. We're going to fill the tank with water, and we're not going to go anywhere. And that's basically what the Mariners have been doing for the last decade. They make a move, they add a big piece. Oh, they add a big name. A big name's great, but this is not the NBA. This is not a sport where one big name puts you over the top. We've seen the names that the Red Sox added, Chris Sale, among them. And sure, you know what? They were able to win their division. Not, I wouldn't say handily, but they won it comfortably. And they get bounced in the first round. I mean, this is a game where, it's great to have a big name, but you need a bunch of names around them that should be at least household names in that area who can string you together comfort and consistency throughout that lineup that forces pitchers to pitch to you. And right now you have a guy who can lead off in D. Gordon, and you have Robinson Cano and Nelson Cruz who they hit on occasion, but nothing else is really between that. And when you have one starter and the rest of the rotation is junk, you're not going to do anything. And yes, it is time for a full rebuild there. I'm sorry, Seattle fans, but Chris is right. That is the only way you're going to be able to compete coming down the pike in the next 4 or 5. I know. I can't. I know. I said it. It scared me too. It, honest to God, scared me.
I was just looking to see if the ice from hell freezing over was making its way up to Earth.
Well, to be fair, it is like 40 degrees here in Florida right now, so I'm just throwing that.
Really?
Did you guys get sunshine? Snow? The Sunshine State had, up in the north, up like in the north part of Florida. Yeah, the Sunshine State actually had snow on the ground, like an inch or two. But no, down here, I've seen snow flurry down here, but it'll never stick. But no, you are exactly right. It is time. It's been time for a rebuild for 2 or 3 years. When the Cano Cruz thing didn't work, and it was consistently not working, and you were ending up consistently in the bottom 2/3 of, and I get that's a pretty wide margin, but when you're ending up 7th, 8th, maybe 6th, 5th, if you're lucky, as the Mariners have, on a consistent basis, and no matter, you're not making any big moves to fix anything, yes, tear it down, start over. I get it stinks, but this is where we talk about baseball being a regional sport. You know what? Yeah, it's going to suck for those people in the Pacific Northwest, but the rest of baseball isn't going to notice. And I hate to say it in a way of where, we want baseball to be this all-encompassing sport, but when it comes down to it, 30 teams across the country in a game that takes right now 3 hours to play, that regionality, that rebuild isn't going to be as painful for everybody to watch because not everybody's going to watch it.
And let's be honest, let's be fair, not just the Pacific Northwest. I mean, most of baseball's fans aren't going to really notice the rebuild that's going on in Detroit right now. Most of baseball fans didn't really realize that the Angels were rebuilding at one point and are probably still sort of in need of one.
The Angels are
most
mired
baseball,
because of the Josh Hamilton and the Pujols contract that has them, has them handcuffed for the next 4 or 5 years.
Yeah, nearly none of baseball is going would recognize a Tampa Bay rebuild. And to be fair, most of baseball isn't going to recognize the Marlins in their attempt to rebuild. It's going to be a thing that happens, and then once they get into a place, if the Marlins ever get back to a place where they're in a position to win a World Series, then the rest of baseball world will realize, hey, they took some time, they tore it down, they rebuilt. But unless it's the Yankees or the Dodgers or one of those top market teams, regionality is going to play a role in whether or not people notice rebuilds. Of course, I would like to say one thing that I think is great about the D. Gordon trade, and of course we know that you guys have a lot to say about Stanton and about D. Gordon, and we want to hear from you guys. Please hit us up. We're on Facebook. Out of Left Field with Chris and Graham is the Facebook page, at OO Left Field on Twitter. Of course, we're part of the Grueling Truth Network. GruelingTruth.net is the website. At Grueling Truth on Twitter. Hit us up.
And of course, the Out of
Let
Left
us
Field
know.
Baseball community page.
Oh, right, the Out of Left Field Baseball community page where you can come and be a part of the baseball community with Out of Left Field, conversate with us, talk about baseball in a safe environment where people are only going to judge you so much as Graham and I judge each other. Oh, wait, no, I guess maybe it's not a safe place because we will judge you just as much as we judge each other.
Did the English teacher who's about to get their degree to say the word conversate?
Yes.
Isn't it converse?
It's colloquial. It's colloquial English. It's a word in common usage. It's colloquial English. It's a word in common usage.
Oh, there's your grammar lesson for the day, folks. But, Chris, you hit on something at the end of that last segment with the LA Angels that we didn't really see they were in a rebuild. And you're right. I mean, you don't think about, okay, Jared Weaver, he goes. Well, that was he was a no-hit, a no-hitter throwing pitcher. He was, a top pitcher in the American League for a number of years, and they let him go. And say, okay, well, now what do we do? We know they have Trout. We know, you think Angels, I have Mike Trout. Okay, well, yeah, they have Pujols too, and they have, a bunch of other players. But yes, they have been in a rebuild, and they made probably one of the, they made the second biggest splash, but it's kind of hard when that splash was overshadowed by a boulder falling off of a cliff into a nice placid ocean or lake that is now rocking with waves. But in a couple of things, and you mentioned this just a few minutes ago, the Angels agreed to terms with Kevin Maitan and Livan Soto, both of whom were players for the Atlanta Braves organization. And Maitan, the one we said was released from his contract by the commissioner after everything happened with John Coppola, the former GM. So, he's you're looking at Soto, a guy who's been struggling. He's had a slash line of 225, 332, 254 in the Gulf Coast League. Had 27 walks though in 26 plate appearances, but it's just. I'm sorry, he had 27 walks against 26 plate appearances, but it's good for them to see. Maitan is the guy that the Braves wanted to target, and we knew they were going to lose him, and that will be a big. He's 17 years old, didn't have a great first year. A 241, 290, 340 slash line, but again, you're in the Gulf Coast League and the Appalachian League. He's got plenty of time, to get himself into a position and to learn the game of baseball the way the major leagues play it. But the other big one is, as you mentioned, and we talked about with the Mariners and getting that extra $1 million of international pool money, Shohei Otani was the big name that was going to be coming out of the NPB in Japan, and it turned out that after he requested. And I don't know how much you watched or read anything on the Otani sweepstakes, if you will, his agent sent out a request to all 30 teams to send a response to basically, what does your city have to offer? Why should he give his services to you? What's great about your city? What's not so great? I mean, like this crazy list of things for him to pick through. And at the end of the day, he decides that he is going to sign with the Angels. Now, I don't think that a West Coast team was particularly surprising. We've seen several Japanese players sign with, Ichiro being a big one. We saw Hideo Nomo, back in the 90s. Also, there was Bruce Chen. I can't think of the other, the one who.
There's Park. There's not a Japanese player,
Chan-Ho Park.
Chan-Ho Park.
I think that's what I was trying to think of. But players from that side of the world who tend to be more comfortable on the West Coast because it is, in a relative sense, closer to their home. It's a way for family to come see them easier. Fans will come in droves to the U.S. to watch them play, and it allows them to feel a little bit more at home as they are kind of sowing their oats. Maybe not the best term, but kind of getting themselves used to what they're seeing. So I was absolutely blown away by this, but I mean, this is a big thing for the Angels, and with Otani, he's looking to play both ways. He wants to pitch, and he wants to to be a defender and hit. And in the in the American League, the hard thing there is that if your pitcher hits, you lose your DH. So I'm curious to see how well he hits and how Mike Scioscia uses him in that role, because if a defensive player comes in, it can get the DH rule a little bit tricky. He's going to have to be kind of shored up on those parts of the rule book.
Right, and one of the things that we're going to see here is we're going to see everything that we've sort of talked about as far as what when we were talking about Madison Bumgarner, when they play in an American League park and allowing him to hit for himself in those games, losing their DH and then having to figure out how to fill in that role later in the game, we might see that sort of thing play out here in Los Angeles with Shohei Otani on a pretty regular basis if what was said at his press conference is going to be, in fact, what happens. It has been said by both Billy Epler and Mike Scioscia that Shohei Otani is going to have an opportunity to hit, and he's going to have an opportunity to be a defensive player, and he's going to be a two-way guy for them, quote, if we can figure it out. So I assume that means that they're going to go through spring training with him as a two-way guy, see how it plays out. If it goes the way they want it to go, that's what we're going to see in the regular season, which is going to be the first time we see a two-way guy in a really, really long time. Now, they're calling Shohei Otani the Japanese Babe Ruth. If that's the case, if he's the power guy and pitching phenom that Babe Ruth was, then this is going to be a lot of fun to watch.
It is, and the big thing here, though, is that Otani's young. He's 23, but he has been used to pitching once a week. Had an ankle and leg injury this past year, only had 5 starts, but it looks like there's a possibility that the Angels may try to roll an actual 6-man rotation instead of the normal 5. So, Otani he's got some really impressive pitching stats, a 2.52 career ERA, just over 10 strikeouts per 9 innings, 3.5 walks per 9, but he's never pitched more than 161 innings in his career. So it looks like that, yes, the Angels will have to run a 6-man rotation. They'll see if Otani maybe gets more comfortable working into a 5, how he feels, but that'll be interesting. But yes, if he has the power that they claim, and at least, and we've talked about that the Nippon Professional Baseball League in Japan, it's a mixture of AA to AAA ball. But in AA, AAA ball, he hit 286 with a 358 slash and a 500 a slugging percentage, which isn't bad. I mean, when you're slugging .858, pretty decent numbers. So yes, at this point, the Angels have nothing to lose. He's 23 years old, meaning that he's considered an amateur under the MLB collective bargaining agreement. So his contract is a minor league deal. He gets a league minimum $545,000. He gets his signing bonuses. He'll be eligible for arbitration in 2020. So they have nothing to lose. He gets a signing bonus of $2.3 million, and I think to the point we made earlier, there were 7 teams that were in the final running for him, and it was the Rangers and the Cubs, okay, kind of middle of the U.S., the Padres, the Dodgers, the Giants, the Mariners, and the Angels. All West Coast stuff. That's where he's most comfortable. That's where he feels himself most comfortable. As a 23-year-old kid, way away from home, I can't say I blame him.
Well, Epler has nothing but good things to say about him, and that's important. I mean, obviously, anytime you sign a guy, you want him to be the GM's first choice, and it looks like Otani is Billy Epler's first choice. But the thing that the things that he says about Otani are pretty promising for the Angels in the future. He says, quote, "This guy consumes all things baseball. There's not a lot else going on in his world but baseball and training. He does like to read a lot." He continues on saying that Otani is very humble, compared his mental makeup to that of Mike Trout. And Trout actually sent out a video phone call to recruit Otani that went quite well, and then called Epler Monday night while he was on the East Coast for his wedding this weekend. Called Epler Monday night after the meeting and said, "What's he like? What's he like?" Epler replied, quote, "He's like you. He's simple, humble, and he wants to be great." So,
wait, Trout's getting married? Did you get an invite? I didn't get an invite.
No, man, I didn't either. And I feel snubbed at this point. I feel
that's that junk right there.
Snubbed as Fred McGriff.
Well, on the bright side, hopefully Fred McGriff isn't going to be waiting too long for the Hall of Fame. Although the numbers don't, they don't look too good. We'll get to the Hall of Fame here in just a second. Let's touch on something real quick before we talk a little Hall of Fame, and that is that the Cubs have reached an agreement, a 2-year agreement with a club option for 2020 with Brandon Morrow. Looks like he will be the piece that likely is to replace Jake Arrieta, who rejected his qualifying offer, and I don't think the Cubs are going to really work incredibly hard to re-sign. His numbers have dipped drastically since that Cy Young year, the year before they won the World Series. But again, looking at that $10 to $11 million per year, and it's looking like it will be a 2-year. So, this is good. He's a reliever. We'll see if they try to work him into, if they try to work him into maybe a little bit of starting. I doubt it. The few times we actually saw him start, it wasn't that great. But also Wade Davis is a free agent, a piece that I do believe the Cubs should target again. He pitched phenomenally well, one of the best closers in baseball last year. But again, they pick up Brandon Morrow. That's good because, and we look at what has happened with this Cubs bullpen. They have lost Hector Rondon. They haven't re-signed Wade Davis, Brian Dunsing, or Koji Uehara. So, you need someone in there that can pick up Carl Edwards Jr., Pedro Strop, Mike Montgomery, Justin Wilson. And we saw the middle of that bullpen struggle trying to get to Wade Davis. And that is what hurt the Cubs last year. And, I mean, the Cubs, they weren't a horrible team. They weren't a great team. But, it was, it's someone that it's good to see them pick up. He was great last year for the Dodgers. He was 6-0 last year. So, he goes to a team that I think the Cubs hope to see in the playoffs next year, and hopefully we will as well. But I don't think there's much to say on that besides really what's in black and white. But let's turn to the Hall of Fame real quick. And as it came out, as you were heading home, we were talking and prepping for the show. The the Hall of Fame's Modern Baseball Era Committee has elected Jack Morris and Alan Trammell into the Baseball Hall of Fame today. It was announced on MLB Network this evening, right around 6:15, 6:30. This is not the, big Baseball Writers Association of America ballot that we'll be talking about here coming down for the next couple of weeks. But as we discussed, there are certain committees within the Hall of Fame that also get to have their voices heard in who they elect. It's how I believe La Russa and Bobby Cox made it in the Hall of Fame, among others. Also, I think John Schuerholz was elected via a committee into the Hall of Fame, the longtime Braves GM and really the architect of those great 1990, the 90s decade team of the Braves. But Morris and Trammell, good guys. Jack Morris is a guy who, he made it so high the ballot. I think he's the only player to get over 60 or 70% on the ballot and then never actually make it into the Hall of Fame via the writers. Probably one of his most memorable games was Game 7 of, was it 90 or 90? I think it was 91 or 92 with the Twinkies against John Smoltz and the Braves when I think he threw a complete game into extra innings. If I remember correctly, I was 5 at the time, but I've watched this game and seen the highlights years and years on. But he will make it in. He is also now a color commentator, and Alan Trammell, a longtime player for the Detroit Tigers, also makes it in. Chris, you're a little bit more of the history guy than I am. I'm just really curious, kind of what your thoughts are on this. Trammell's numbers aren't great, but when you look at the time in which he played, I think that's the hard thing now is, we can't. The game has changed. We know it's changed. A 285 average with 185 home runs and under 9,400 plate appearances doesn't seem like Hall of Fame numbers. 6 All-Star appearances, 4 Gold Gloves, 3 Silver Slugger awards, but was a World Series MVP in '84 with the Tigers, a 20-year career in Detroit. What are your thoughts on these guys making it into the Hall?
I think that you're right. I don't think Trammell's numbers are really what we would consider Hall of Fame stats at this point. You look at Trammell over a 20-year career, 285 batting average, 352 on base. You come back here and you look at the guys who are first-year guys this year, and really anybody with a slash line like that isn't the kind of guy that you see projected to really make it into a Hall of Fame. Into the Hall of Fame on the ballot this year. You can compare him to Hideki Matsui or even a Brad Lidge, neither of whom are really projected to make it. Now, obviously, he played a lot longer than either of those guys, but even if you compared him to an Aubrey Huff, right, who's also a first year on the ballot guy, who hit 278 with a 342 on base. Aubrey Huff is not projected to make the Hall of Fame. His production is well below the average Hall of Famer. And this is what those committees exist for, right? To look at guys from the distant past, modern era guys who didn't get picked up in their voting years and maybe take a second look at the career. And so maybe by the standards of a second look, this makes sense to them, but I don't know. Go ahead.
I'll give you a name that really fits the argument that you're making.
Okay.
Played 23 years in the major leagues. Hit 298, 365 on base, slugged a career 417 for a 782 OPS, 173 homers, just shy of 1,200 ribs, had 2,500 hits, actually almost 2,600 hits in his major league career. Tulio Franco.
Well, that definitely makes a good point because,
he's supposedly 48, and the rumors are that he was playing well beyond 40. That his age wasn't correct.
Isn't he gearing up to try to make a comeback too? Did I read that somewhere?
No, that's Rafi Palmeiro.
Oh, was it Rafael Palmeiro?
Yeah, he wants to do a comeback at like 55. Yeah, something like early to mid 50s.
But here's a perfect example of a guy whose numbers are far better. This player has a 292 career batting average, 393 career on base, OPS career 907, hit 509 home runs, and had 13.3% of the vote last year, and that's Gary Sheffield.
Well, yeah, but even you said, and we're not going to get into the big debates we did last year quite as much.
Right.
We're not going to rehash them. But there are also some other glaring reasons that you believe as to why Sheffield is that low. So let's not quite that's not quite apples to apples. That's apples to genetically engineered apples.
Sorry. I'm sorry. That was a good one. That was a really good one. But they're the Larry Walkers of the world, right? The guys who hit over 300 for their career, who only made 21% of the vote last year. This is what these committees exist for, right? To give these guys second chances, guys who maybe do deserve it on some level in comparison to their own time, right? But looking at it with a very presentist point of view, we're not going to look at these guys and go, yeah, if they were on the Hall of Fame ballot this year, they'd make it, because they wouldn't. Let's be honest.
Trammell is a Julio Franco, or I think more to your point, for more modern, a Jeff Kent. He's a Julio Franco, Jeff Kent kind of guy,
right?
And I think that kind of fits more with what you're going for. And I get what you're saying. Again, I mean, Trammell was well before. I really was. I mean, yeah, it's great that he was playing, but I mean, by the time that he was really finishing up his career, he finished in '96. I knew the name a little bit, but I mean, he was well in the twilight by the time I actually remember really watching a ton of baseball. And I grew up with, kind of like you, I mean, I grew up with the Braves. You grew up with, the Giants. So, I mean, we're attuned to those guys, to those players. Right. But yeah, I mean, impressive that he made it 20 years with the same organization. I mean, tip your cap there. But yeah, I mean, yeah, it was a different time defensively. Like we said, 4 gold gloves, 3 silver sluggers. The crazy thing is his silver sluggers came actually, 2 or 3 years removed from all the gold gloves. He kind of won the gold gloves in a row and then sluggers in a row. But yeah, I think Jack Morris is the name, and maybe it's more so by name than anything else. But I think that one kind of makes, a little bit more, sense in the understanding way. I mean, when you have 254 career wins, an ERA it's near 4. Yeah, I mean, he was a good, he was a good pitcher, but never won a Cy Young. Was in a handful of All-Star games. His highest MVP voting was 13th. Highest from Cy Young was 3rd. That was in 1981. So I get it, but I mean, 18 years. He was just one of those. He was just one of he was a pitcher of the era. So right. Yeah, I think at the end of it all, that committee looks at the game. I think they're to give them a different name. They're the nostalgia committee. I think they remember the game a lot for what it was, which is a good thing. And I'm not dogging them for that. It's a good thing that they can sit back and they can appreciate those numbers for what they meant at the time that they happened. Because we look at them now and it's like, oh, okay, I mean, great, golf clap, I suppose. But congrats to both of them. I agree, and I think that's again where the Jeff Kent thing comes in. Obviously, there are some other some questions about him as well as Sheffield, but they are a little bit more on the even side. And of course, we're going to get into all the guys who are on the Hall of Fame ballot this year. We will be discussing plenty of that throughout the next couple of weeks. It was kind of that was a plan this week, and then it kind of got bogged down by that whole Stanton thing.
Well, And I think it'll be good for us to take a day because we do have 19 new names to talk about who are on the ballot for the first time this year. And some of them are some pretty big names who I would consider first ballot Hall of Famers. Chipper Jones is the first one that comes to mind. First ballot guy, in my opinion. And
I think the easiest tease is when you and I talked, I think you and I, if we had the vote, would be looking at five or six guys between the guys who are on the ballot and are returning and the new guys. And it's about an equal. I think it was 3 and 3 of guys that we believe should be into the Hall of Fame, this year out of the 33 names on the list. We're not going to get into that today. Something you guys can look forward to throughout the next couple of weeks of the show. We have about a month or so until those names will be announced by the BBWAA. But you mentioned it, man. Chipper Jones, Jim Tomei, Scott Rowland, Andrew Jones, Jamie Moyer, the old guy, Omar Vizquel, and quite a few others that we've heard. I think those are probably the biggest names currently in the ballot now. But some others that might get some attention down the line, just not going to be your big first ballot, second ballot names you're going to think of right off the bat.
And again, we're entering into a place now. We're entering into a time now where a lot of the names that are coming onto the ballot are nostalgia names for us. For you and me at our age, they're nostalgia names for us. Yeah. Johnny Damon, Johan Santana, Andrew Jones, Chipper Jones, Jim Tomei, Hideki Matsui. These are Aubrey Huff. These are nostalgia names for you and me. So we put a little bit more stock into those names, and I think in much the same way that committee does in the two names that they chose this evening, puts a little bit more stock in those sort of nostalgia names because we remember them as they were when they played because we watched them play.
Right. So and Damon, a guy I had a chance to talk with last year, hopefully again this year at the Diamond Resorts Invitational Golf Tournament in Orlando. Of course, assuming that
and a guy
who's
going to go eventually, in my opinion.
What's that?
A guy who's going to go eventually, in my opinion.
You think
he's
so?
He's a Hall of Famer, in my opinion. Yeah, he's a Hall of Famer, in my opinion. Not a first ballot Hall of Famer, but he's a Hall of Famer, in my opinion. And to give you an idea of what I think, that his numbers are on par with the average Hall of Famer. His career numbers are on par with the average Hall of Famer. And he's actually an Alan Trammell kind of comparison guy to really get into it. 284, 352, OPS of 785, hit 235 home runs, but did a lot of things on the field, did a lot of things with his glove, did a lot of things as a defensive player that really play into that as well. So,
well, let's pull back on the reins a little bit. We got plenty of time. And remember, man, we are just over 1 month into what is going to be a very long offseason. So let's pull back on the reins on that a little bit. Hopefully, like I said, with the DRI, the golf tournament, we will be there. We'll bring you all the good, many good interviews as we can, some good sound bites, all that kind of good stuff. But man, a lot of things going on, and I'm really excited to see what the dominoes are going to be now that Stanton is off the table. That first one has fallen. Man, let the mayhem begin.
No, I agree, and it's going to be a lot of fun to watch over the next few months. But my big question is, going into the upcoming spring, because for me it starts in January, sir. High school baseball begins in January. I intend to be coaching with Mingus Union High School here in Cottonwood, Arizona. How in depth of the analysis are we going to get into Mingus Union High School baseball? Because I feel like it deserves a spot on this show. I just think that no, you're not feeling it. I can tell by your face that you're not feeling it.
I apologize to the listeners. One of the things that we want to bring you over time is the ability to have a sound mixer here, kind of one of the soundboards that you see on some of the bigger stations. If we had that, I would have had crickets prepared for that question. Unfortunately, I did not have that ready so I couldn't insert that sound for you. But if any of you out there have that ability to make that cricket sound, you just do that. Now I'll give you a nice 3-second pause. Excellent. Thank you for helping me out with that. Chris, I appreciate it. You are number one, a great show. I appreciate what you think of me. Guys, thanks for sticking with us. A crazy week, a busy week, and it is only going to get more so as we get ready to get into really what will be the meat of the offseason now that Stanton is gone. Expect a lot of moves. We're going to break down all 30 teams again like we did last year. We'll tell you what your team needs to do to improve. You might like it. You might hate it. Always, we are here with the Grueling Truth Network. For Chris, I'm Graham. Thanks for joining us out of left field. See you next week.